Welcome to Gregorian Chat.
La-di-da-di-da. Welcome, people, to the podcast.
Gregorian Chat, episode
30-something.
33.
33!
The age that Jesus was when he died.
Oh, yes, could be our last podcast. Nah, it won't be now.
No way. Not by a long shot.
Not even
I think we're definitely planning on continuing this podcast.
forever.
Indefinitely, I guess. I was going to say next year, but let's just go with indefinitely.
Forever, yeah. That's
You may know it by now that I will be leaving, unfortunately, chaplaincy next year to go and do some teaching, which is my career.
Yeah.
But we do want to continue the podcast.
Yes,
because
we do.
just love being together.
Yes.
And spending time.
Bit of a bromance
I mean,
going on.
Well, sorry, Laura and Jess,
Sorry,
but
Jess.
you know,
Yeah. They know.
so much
they know.
that you can do, really.
Anyway,
No,
so
kidding.
what have you been up to recently, Dom?
What have I been up to? I feel like I've just been enjoying married life, really.
Oh, yeah?
Just been, I think like watching a lot of shows, looking for different TV shows to work, to watch. Been a bit sick.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I feel like this is almost my year of sickness.
Well, you know.
Be a good idea for a movie. But it's still been the best year of my life at the same time, you know.
Brilliant.
So it's kind of like a Job year, I guess.
A Jobia. Very good.
A Job well done.
Yeah.
There's,
I'm feeling jovial.
Job.
Anyway.
What about you? What do you?
What I've been doing? Well, recently I lost my glasses,
Well, this-
which, has been a real, thorn in my eye.
I can see why that would be.
Yes. Framed it beautifully, that joke. Anyway, so...
That lends well to the discussion.
Yes, but so I'm saying optimistic about it. And yeah, I just got my glasses back today, and it's like I was a blind man, and now I can see.
That's that good old optometrist attitude.
Yes.
I mean,
Optimistic. Anyway, so that's been my day of pain yesterday, where I had to wear sunglasses all day.
Oh yeah.
And
this guy over here looking like Stevie Wonder all the time.
Because my only prescription lenses
Except
with me.
white.
And then we had Theology on Tap last night.
Yes, we did.
With Chris Southgate.
Yep.
And I put on some contact lenses, but you're only allowed to wear contact lenses for 6 hours. Otherwise, you could get some sort of necrotizing fasciitis in your eye.
Wowzers, that sounds like a political party.
It's a... Speaking
Who are you voting for?
what? Necrotizing fasciitis. It's a flesh-eating bacteria.
How would you rate your pain? Necrotizing fasciitis. I can't remember what you
Frisky lichen.
Frisky lichen.
This smells...
Oh yeah, the tea today.
I don't know.
The tea today is called licorice legs.
Yeah.
You might not like licking at all, let alone rich people's legs. But I've been wanting to try this tea for a while because it's licorice and I'm Dutch. And I crack highs. But Dom, every time I mention it, Dom's like... Eh.
I'm not a massive fan of licorice. We had licorice all sorts growing up, and I just didn't like them.
But she said it doesn't have any aniseed in it.
Well...
And I think that Dom has just been closing his eyes to this all the time. Aniseed? Nah. Aniseed? Nah. All this time, but now... Yeah, I don't know. I can't quite wrap that one around.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got... I don't have high hopes for this, but I'm going to do it.
Oh, it's got a nice sweet...
Out of your year of pain, I'm going to try some licorice.
It's almost as if it's got like sugar in there. Just get a whiff of that. No, sorry.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right?
The aftertaste.
The aftertaste is sweet.
Almost,
just like
it's almost
rich
like
people's
menthol
legs.
or something.
Yeah, it's pretty mental.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean we've been just enjoying life, I think. But as you well know, to move on to the topic now. Tomorrow is Saturday, September the 23rd, also known as Election Day.
Voting is incommencing. That's a word. Shut up.
I mean you've.
So if you haven't voted already, that's your last opportunity to vote. That's when I'm voting. I'm voting tomorrow.
You know what I just realised?
No, I didn't.
The word vote and veto is like just switching around the O and the E.
I thought veto.
So you
was
can
cooler than
veto
that,
someone's vote, right? In Parliament.
Probably.
So maybe they designed that word as in like, I voted, but if you want to vote against someone's vote, they're like, let's just switch around the words and call it a veto.
If you know the etymology of the word veto, please comment below.
Please. And
anyway, so
voting day.
It's voting day, and so the question we want to deal with is how to love someone whose vote you hate.
How to love someone whose vote you hate.
That's right, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
So basically, we've had this election season, and there's been lots of debates, and there's been lots of people posting lots of things online saying, oh, you shouldn't vote for National because of this, or you shouldn't vote for Labour because of this, and no one even mentions the Greens or anything because it's really a 2-horse race. But so there's been lots of back and forth, and people can get quite passionate about these things, and they, sometimes it brings the best out of us, but sometimes it brings the worst out of us.
That's right. I think on the whole, elections are prone to bring out the worst in everybody.
I don't like
though in the
election
darkness, that is when the light is most visible. But it's politics at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But it is relevant to us, and so I think so. That asking that question, regardless of what the election result is, how are we going to be good Christians? And as we said last time, we did the podcast on how to make a good vote as a Catholic, how Catholics should vote. And obviously we can't tell you who we think the best person to vote for is as a Catholic. I mean, you'll all be from different electorates, or maybe you're listening to this in London, which means that you won't be able to vote in New Zealand, but we appreciate your viewership. But maybe think about this in relation to your own political situation.
Yeah.
How do we be good Christians? And this is, I guess, what we'll find out tomorrow night is either in the face of defeat or in victory. If we're heavily siding with one party or the other.
Yes. So and I think it is also just helpful in kind of life to help out. Deal with things. Sometimes you meet someone that you disagree with, and how do I act with this person? And also, just I think it helps us deal with that idea of love our enemies.
Yeah.
Think about who is our enemies. How do I love them, and how do I act as a Christian in these situations?
That's a big question, though, and so you might be wondering, who is my enemy? Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I think it was interesting that he made that distinction. I mean, maybe it's just a writing technique, I guess. Sometimes they use two things like that to make a point. But I think if we pull that apart a bit, because it's in a sense, there are enemies and enemies, right? If you were a Jew in the Second World War,
right, yeah,
the Germans are your enemies.
Yeah, but the Germans aren't now the enemies of Jews,
No. So I guess it's contextual. But also it's at that same time, a Jew then, would probably find, a bear in the woods is an enemy that wants to kill them. I mean, or even just disease is an enemy, or...
Yeah, or in the sea you find enemies all the time. But, and it could, I always like to think it's sometimes your enemy could be, your sibling. It's you currently want to go on the PS2, but they're playing the game that they want to play, and therefore they're stopping you from doing so.
Yeah.
Therefore they're your enemy.
Yeah. And we use that word lightly a lot, I think, in terms of being enemies with something. And you could say that opposition parties, maybe another way of saying it is an enemy party. Because they want their, policies and stuff to be enacted, and you want yours, and that's in conflict. But I think as Christians, we need to realize a huge point is that we only have one real enemy, ultimately.
Right, that's
in
true.
our life, in our existence as Christians, as human beings. And some of you might think, okay, well, the enemy is those, real liberal lefties who want to, bring in abortion laws, euthanasia, even those people who want to, legalize drugs and marijuana and bringing down society, they're the enemy. Okay? Other people might think it's those really rich fascists who, they want to bring up house prices and just institute capitalism, basically.
Yeah. They want the rich to get rich and the poor to get poorer.
Exactly. But in both cases, if you actually dig deeper into what's going on there, those aren't people who are acting, I guess, out of evil for evil. In the sense that people aren't our enemies. The only true enemy is the devil.
Yes.
And sin and the devil being, I guess, a package deal.
Yeah, and we can only, as humans, we can only work out of our context which is whatever your upbringing is, whatever maybe financial situation you're in. I was listening to Bishop Barron. He says if we look to all the Enlightenment philosophers around the time of the Enlightenment, they were coming out of like wartime, and so all their things are skewed to this whole thing is like, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. So it isn't like necessarily it's pointing at truths, but their whole thing is skewed by this horrible history that they just lived through.
Yeah.
And so we need to take that in consideration, and then bring it to like our everyday. It's like we need to take into consideration, if someone's voting for a particular party, into like, well, what situation are they coming out of? And of course, if you're in that situation, of course you'd vote for that party. It makes heaps of sense. And I think this is what it comes into, like loving the people whose votes you hate. Is kind of like we need to love them by like giving them the dignity that they deserve of actually hearing them out.
Definitely, I think that's important. Like that's just an important like human thing to do. But definitely what you're saying there with like understanding where people are coming from in their context. Because okay, let's say an example: you meet somebody who's voting New Zealand first, and you say, oh, okay. Like your first reaction might be to judge that person and be like, oh, well, obviously your intellect isn't formed enough, well enough for you to be able to understand that you should be voting, the party that I'm voting for. But it's like, okay, well, before you see the log, in your brother's eye, see the log in your own eye, but also I think it's just like, okay, is someone voting for New Zealand first? Okay, well then you might ask them, oh, why is that? And you say, oh, because I believe, that, people who are born in New Zealand should have a first choice in a career over someone who's an immigrant,
Yes.
Okay, and that might be the main driver behind them voting for New Zealand first. And you say, oh, okay, so why do you believe that people born in New Zealand have that right? And it's like, and then they might give another point, which is just, well, because I just think it's wrong. For that to happen. It's like, okay, well, where is that coming from? Was there an experience in your life that made you feel that way? And it might be that their parents, trained and studied in New Zealand, and they were born, in New Zealand as well. They might be third or fourth generation Kiwis. And it's like, they've been working within New Zealand's system to try and make it well, but then, an immigrant comes in with higher qualifications and takes the job. It's like, okay, so now I can understand where you're coming from.
And I think one thing to point out that what we're not saying is, everyone's right, and you should just like lay down. It's like, oh, you voted for that. I'm sure you've got your situation, you got your reasons, so I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say you're wrong or you're right. It's like, no. We're actually called, like, if you love someone, that means you love. In loving means you have to oppose hate. In doing what is right, you have to oppose wrong. And so what I guess we're being called to do, and maybe what we're encouraging in this podcast, is less of a non-judgmental stance, but more of in loving you, I'm going to engage with you and see what you're talking about. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you, but it means I'm going to love you.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's very important. A point Don made earlier is like loving someone does not mean that you agree with everything they say. And I think that's something that's very important to bear in mind. It's like, it's okay, sort of like if a Labour supporter and a Conservative supporter or a National supporter can go out for a beer with each other, have a good chat, and still be, will the good of the other, which is what loving is.
Absolutely. I think in our generation, I don't think we quite have an understanding of what that means to really be able to relate to people regardless of these kinds of barriers. Like, I've met so many young people now who are really searching for the truth. Maybe they're new to the faith and they're like, oh, well, no, but I wouldn't associate myself with that person because A, B, and C. And it's like, have we completely if you read history, if you read authors, you read amazing poets and things. I mean, even like the Inklings, right? So you've got C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and like a bunch of other dudes. And like they had frequent disagreements with each other about huge things, moral things, about theology, things about even writing techniques and stuff. But it's like, we need to understand that, I think by we can love somebody without, like you said, agreeing with everything that they say, and at the same time we can disagree with everything that somebody says, and still that doesn't mean that we hate them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's become people, like the way the world wants to go is to polarize you and to make you, you know, a student of one train of thought. It wants to make you, you know.
And I think also it's like
partisan.
In trying to put yourself as like, okay, I'm only going to hang out with people I agree with. Where's the discussion? Where's the debate? Where's the, you know, intellectual engagement? And
do you want to form your mind further, or are you comfortable in your little intellectual box?
And you know, I've got a friend of mine, and on Facebook he likes and posts heaps of things that he doesn't believe in, and he knows his friends don't, because it creates discussion. And it's a bit controversial, and after a while you get sick of it. But it's also, it's like, you know, it's cool in a sense, because it's kind of like, I'm not just going to be this one person. You know, I'm going to put out lots of different ideas. Now that's not saying that we need to start doing that. We definitely need to. I feel personally, it is better to have a one perspective, and like I find that having been not Christian and Christian, I feel like I've gotten a lot more out of having a platform from which to leap from, which being my Christian values. So we need to use those as be able to say, actually, that's wrong, and that's right, and this is why.
Yeah. I was watching a podcast actually by as Pints with Aquinas. Matt Fradd was doing one on loving your enemy. And looking at what Aquinas was saying, I'm just going to blatantly take this and discuss it in our podcast.
Cheers, Matt.
But so basically, you know, like Aquinas was saying, in some cases, like if you truly love somebody, if you are truly to love your enemy, rather, that doesn't just mean not giving them a hard time. Like loving your enemy doesn't mean making it just as easy for them as possible and not being in conflict. In some cases, like if you think about your family, your son, if you truly love your son and he's doing something bad, the best way to show an act of love to your son would be to actually correct him.
Yes.
And, you know, show him his fault, his error. And it's the same with our enemies. If we are truly to want the good of our enemy, then we should want them to be to receive that reproof so they can change, not so they can be reproved, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's tricky, I guess, because it's like when you disagree with somebody's political stance, then you might think, oh, well, no, I want to love my enemy, that person, by showing them how wrong they are and how right I am, you know? And that's the temptation. But I think maybe the call here for us as Christians is to say, how can I be loving to that person regardless of what they believe, but also in loving them, hopefully I can try and, you know, together we can come to the truth.
One of my favorite phrases is, you know, I can't remember where I heard it, but it's like, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to not punch them in the face, which means it's like, you know, this is someone that I, you know, fundamentally disagree with on so many issues. And so what I'm not going to do is I'm going to love them by not bringing up these issues. I'm not going to start a fight with them. Next time I see them, I'll keep it pleasant and, you know, I'll be as friendly as possible, which might mean leaving the room when I get too angry. Yeah. But I think you know, we shouldn't argue in order to convince somebody that they're wrong. We should debate in order to, you know, have a creative and a good discussion. Yeah. And we need people that have different points of view to us. Yeah. We also need to live our Christian life, which is to love one another, is to feed the homeless, is to clothe the naked, and it's to house and it's to, you know, and be with people in need, and not say, okay, government, you do that because I'm far too busy.
Yeah, and on Saturday and after Saturday, when, you know, potentially a new government comes in, or whatever government ends up being in, it's like that's action time. That's when these policies will apparently start being institutionalized. But we need to keep, as you know, as Christians, we need to keep doing that. Already, we need to be helping the poor ourselves. And I think another thing, just like some last thoughts to finish on. We need to be gracious in both victory and defeat. Okay, so if the party you voted for and want to get into government wins in the election tomorrow, you need to be a gracious Christian. You know, you can't be abominable. And if you lose, then you can't. You know, if you just go posting on Facebook, oh, another, you know, whatever, another 3 years of this douchebaggery. You know,
yeah.
So anyway, this tea was amazing.
I was actually pleasantly surprised.
Nice and sweet.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Be sure to join us for a podcast next week.
Yes.
And thanks to Tori, who won the tea last week.
Go Tori. And
Amazing.
Wherever you are in the world, you can engage in our podcast by sharing and liking and commenting and
Subscribe.
get yourself some tea. God
Get it.
bless. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.
Make sure that you check us out on our YouTube channel, Auckland Catholic Tertiary Chaplaincy.
You can also find us on Facebook.com/The Chaplains.
And our Instagram account, which is Auckland Catholic Chaplaincy.
We're also now on iTunes. Just search up Gregorian Chat.
Boom.
That's right.
Thanks for listening.
God bless.